I'm Jason, and this is video number 2 of my Trans Am Resto project. So my last video was a bit of an introduction to the channel itself, and this video is more of an introduction to the car. We did get a sneak peek of the car in the last video when we were actually in Missouri picking the vehicle up, but for the foreseeable future, this is where she's going to be staying while I collect the parts that I'm going to need and the money that I'm going to need to restore this car to what I want out of this Trans Am. Let me put the age of this car into perspective for you. Certainly this car is not as old as a lot of popular restoration projects, but it's still a pretty old car. And to give you some ideas of what was happening in the world when this car was new, I got some notes. The song Enter Sandman from Metallica came out the same year this car was born. The grunge era was kind of born with this car. Nirvana's second album is the album that made them world famous, and the album Nevermind came out the same year this car was manufactured. Boyz II Men's Motown Philly was released in 1991. Freddie Mercury of Queen was still making new music, and in 1991 he had at least 2 new songs on the radio. Freddie Mercury also later died the same year this car was manufactured. The artist formerly known as Prince was still 2 years away from changing his name from Prince to a symbol. So if you would have bought this car new in 1991 and one of the first things you wanted to do was to go on a date, chances are pretty high that you would have watched Terminator 2. The Hubble Space Telescope was launched in 1991. The national average for gasoline was about $1.14, and in my home state, might have been under $1 in some of the more remote and rural gas stations. And last but not least, and this is probably the single biggest event that happened when this car was manufactured, the internet as we know it today was born when the World Wide Web debuted in 1991. Okay, so now that we got some things that happened that kind of are in the same range of the date when this car was manufactured, let me go on into some things about why I chose this car. This car is old enough to feel old, but new enough to have just a touch of modern features. For example, in this car we have electronic fuel injection. And one of the other quirks from this era was that the key that you used to open the door was not going to be the same key that you used to start the car, and there was no keyless entry available on this model. The youngest of these cars at the time of this video is going to be 28 years old, and the oldest of these cars at the time of this video is going to be 38 years old. This basic body style was made for 10 years from 1982 to 1992, and that gives you a wide range of cars to choose from that, believe it or not, a lot of them still used the same parts throughout the entire decade. So what that basically means is although some of these parts are beginning to become a little hard to find, for the most part, the parts for these cars are widely available and you can get them at reasonable prices. There's also a personal touch of nostalgia for this car because I had one almost just like this one back when I was in high school. And even though over the years I have bought many cars that were superior in every way, for some reason this is the car that always makes me think of the car that I had that was the most fun to drive. I think for me it came down to the fact that it was the perfect balance of power and handling, and it was easy enough to break the car loose if you wanted to get a little sideways, but it was also fairly easy to regain control and maintain control of that car. The problem, of course, was that I was young and stupid, and the only thing that I could see was the next newest model or something a little nicer, and so I wanted to trade and get a new one as quickly as possible, but then I spent the rest of my life wondering why I ever got rid of this car. So periodically I've gone back to the internet and I've done a search for my original vehicle, and the only information that I've been able to find on my old original car was that it was registered in North Carolina and that it was registered in a county with severe flood damage, and there's been no activity since 2009. I hold out a little bit of hope that my car is in some garage with someone who intends to take care of it just the way I intend to do with this car, but I also know that the reality is probably closer to it's long been crushed and sold for scrap. People in pretty much every generation tend to like the cars that they came up with, so I find it pretty typical that people that are about 10 or 12 years older than me like the second gens better. People that are a little younger than me like the fourth gens better. People in my age group, I think it's pretty common that we like these third gen cars. And ultimately, who could blame us? I mean, we grew up watching the Dukes of Hazzard, watching Knight Rider and Smokey and the Bandit. And in case you missed any of those shows or the movie, those were all productions where the car was the star of the show itself, and it really wasn't necessarily about the actors. They were in there and helped to tell the story, but ultimately it was the car that had the majority of the screen time. And so for people like me coming up when you're 12, 13, 14 years old and you're first beginning to look at cars, these were very likely some of the cars that you saw that were available to you to actually purchase in your hometown that maybe caught your attention. I know for me, the first time I ever saw one of these cars, and I thought, man, I would love to have one of those. It was a gray one. It had this bumper style, so it was a 91 or 92 model. And I remember thinking, when I am an adult, I'm going to own one of those cars. And sure enough, I did. But, you know, when I had my car, I was pretty broke, and if something ever messed up on the car, there really wasn't much of anything I could do except pray that it would last until the next paycheck and I would get it fixed. Well, today the story's a little different. These cars are so inexpensive now, and the parts for them are so available. Ultimately, it just costs a whole lot less money to restore a car like this back to better than original than it does to go and buy a new car today. I also think it's pretty noble to take a car like this that maybe if left to the wrong hands or the wrong buyer would be destined for a scrapyard, and to give it an entire second chance at living another life on the road. This iteration is the last update that was given to the third gens before they went over to the fourth generation F-body series. And the main differences, of course, were this nose cone was updated to have the look of the Banshee show car, concept car that Pontiac had made, the Aero Kit ground effects that wrap around the side of the car, as well as an updated spoiler. They called it the Aero Kit. Just as a matter of personal preference, I believe that this is the best that the third gen F-bodies had to offer, and I'm lucky enough to have one that had not only the T-tops, but the black cross-lace wheels as well. And just in case you're one of those people who are automatically saying, but hey, T-tops leak, so I wouldn't want T-tops, just know that this car is 29 years old with original T-tops, and they don't leak. I can't say the same thing for the hole someone drilled in the top to add an antenna at some point, but I'll fix that. All of the third gen Firebirds and Trans Ams had the pop-up headlights, and to me, the pop-up headlights really finish off what amounts to a very clean and sleek look on the front of the car. That's probably going to be the first thing I fix, by the way, because they don't work. And the last reason to own a car like this one is YouTube. You know, when I had this car back in the day, if anything at all went wrong with it, other than maybe, you know, low of coolant or air pressure or out of gas, there really wasn't much that I knew how to work on these cars, and there wasn't a lot of resources available to help me do it outside of a Chilton's or Haynes manual, which really got into some stuff that was going to leave me way over my head. But there's a massive community of enthusiasts behind these cars, and you can go on YouTube and learn how to repair almost anything you want to repair on one of these. To sum it all up, I chose this car because I wanted a project. I could have bought one that was already completely restored and in great shape, but then I would have nothing to do but enjoy driving it. And although that's great, I also want to enjoy bringing this car up to a better standard. This car is right on the edge of in really good shape or really needs a lot of work. It's somewhere right in the middle. I can crank this car right now and drive it to the store and buy something to drink and then come back in a few minutes and park it and work on it. Or I can just decide to set aside an entire day to do some research, figure out what I want to fix next, and make the repair. I think it's a great way to go back and relive some of the fun times that I had when I was becoming an adult. I think it's a great way to spend some of my adult years learning a new craft. I also think it's a great way to spend some time with my family. You know, my kids maybe want to help me do some repair. Maybe we take it to some car shows or on some touring, and there's plenty of seating for me, my wife, and 2 children. Although the back seats are pretty small, and small children is about the limit. And that pretty well wraps up the introduction to the actual car. So if you're like me and you enjoy tinkering, or if you like these cars, give me a thumbs up, a like, and a subscribe. I'm going to be back with more videos as the progress travels on for the car. And if you missed the actual channel introduction video, I'll put a link in the description. And when the next video gets made, I'll include a link for that video in the description as well. And until then, this is Jason encouraging you to reach out and reconnect with an old car from your past. But if that's out of the question, I'm happy to have you follow along as I do.